We're just going to kick off this afternoon. We're going to start to go through some of the due diligence and the selection criteria and how we actually go about picking a good investment property, how hedge funds go and pick a good series of investment properties. Touch on, obviously, just a couple of websites that I'm sure I've directed every single person here to. I'm sure you've been there. No, I don't know the website yet, but we're also going to obviously explore a lot more when we go actually to these cities. You can get into some amazing opportunities here in the US, like you really can, but at the same time, you have to have someone on the ground who's going to say, you know what, that's actually worth $2.5 million, you know? But how would you know that just looking at it? I mean, there's a flamingo down the bottom there. I'm not too sure if anyone saw that. Has anyone been to the Dirty Bird while they've been here, the Flamingo Hotel? Yes, you have. You've probably seen me getting escorted out, or in rather. But this is sort of like, you know, what we're talking about here today specifically is the fact that, you know, we can obviously just pick properties off the interweb or get a buyer's agent to go off and get it for us, or, you know, whatever method you want to use. A realtor, which is probably the worst case example, because they're just there to make money. Let's face it, they've got a job to do. By getting people that obviously do this as a living because it's their own portfolio of wealth, borrowing from their knowledge and allowing them to obviously take us on their journey, that makes it a lot easier for us and saves us a lot of heartache and a lot of time. So when we're actually dealing with some of the other multinational investors or hedge funds and they're actually looking to go through and evaluate a region or a specific criteria for picking out properties, they're doing so with an expected loss. They'll pick out 100 properties expecting 20% to be duds. It's just the way that they work. However, getting an 80% volatile, 80% positive return on a 20% volatile return is an acceptable loss. Now, we started in Phoenix. I think everybody knows that. We did a lot of work there. We got some amazing capital growth in that city. We also went to Atlanta. And Atlanta we recently closed out, obviously, because of the impact that these hedge funds are having in that market. One thing that they obviously identified while we were doing the same thing, they just took a little bit longer to do so, is the fact that it had all the variables in place. It had everything that made it up as a great environment to invest. However, if they're spending $500 million in that market picking up as many properties as they can, they're going to take a lot of bad properties. They'll pick up a lot of bad choices, and they'll tolerate that. They'll ride that. One thing, obviously, when we're looking out for our selection criteria, and this is something that Ben and Tara are going to go into a lot more detail, I'm going to tell you from a perspective of global investing. So when myself or whoever else is looking at any market in the world, India, Europe, South Africa, parts of Australia, US, Canada, etc., there are pretty much uniform methods to be able to appreciate and identify what's good, what's bad, what's just funny to look at. Okay, and so these are just some of the points that you're going to look at. These are going to be, you know, quite logical to most people, but at the same time, it'll be funny how they actually translate in the end return. The main method for us to be able to utilize for US is the price, as in the entry point, and the net return. That's it. That's all we really need to associate for ourselves, because everything else is done for us. Okay, we do a lot of the work. Ben and Tyler's crew of selection team and the refer team do a lot of the work. Everything's done for you. We've just simplified it. Yet, we'll give you those sort of baby steps into taking bigger steps and obviously walking right through to the end to obviously make a bigger success of it. The crux of it is, the weakest part of your investment is your tenant. That's your socioeconomic group. This is when, and as hard as it can be, you have to be a bit of a snob. Okay? There are some elements of society that are less than appreciable for an investment perspective. They are not up to the same caliber of where we might be, where we expect to go to a 9-to-5 job, for example, or we expect to be able to work for a living and basically make a living. These are the people who just move in, won't pay rent. Okay? Those are not the tenants that you want. You need, obviously, a perspective of your population group, and they will live in certain elements of a society. They'll live in certain zones or neighborhoods or districts. Now, sometimes you can still get good property deals in these districts, believe it or not, but by and large, you just won't. So these are areas we just don't go to. Similar to where you might find a large trailer park. Being snobbish, you just wouldn't invest there. You can buy a trailer for like $500 in this country. Theoretically, you can stick it anywhere. You can do that in Australia as well, but it's not going to get you the highest caliber of tenant that's going to have a sustainable income who's going to be able to pay you back for your investment. So you're actually looking at a stable or an increasing population that obviously has a certain component that will actually be able to contribute back to your investment. Moreover, they want to succeed and obviously move into an environment whereby they will actually make more money for themselves and grow and develop, move to larger, more affluent areas. They want to progress in life. You obviously will therefore need a certain person who's going to have a certain type of education and employment. Okay, it's just the sort of personality types that you'll actually just get into. One of the other perspectives I think most people seem to forget is that just because they might be a doctor, a lawyer, a physician, whoever right now, doesn't mean they will be tomorrow. People lose their jobs, people change their minds, people have all sorts of reasons why they obviously just change in tangent, change in direction. So therefore, you obviously need to surround yourself in an environment where it will be easily replaced. if your tenant does decide to move out. Now, what I'm talking about specifically there, and I chose professional industries because labour industries are usually an easy target, but let's say you, for whatever reason, you invested in Detroit in 1989. And it was obviously an interesting point in that financial history for them. They were obviously in a downturn. It was a recession at that point. But it's blue collar, okay? And if one blue collar loses his job, there's another blue collar that will replace it for that purpose, okay? They lose their job, another one will come in. There's just a surplus of blue collar in that area. White collar, not so much at the time, depending on what you're investing in and what your type of property style was. One thing, obviously, you need to be able to identify, though, if you're relying on just one industry type, as in a blue collar, for example, and that industry shuts down, like it did in Detroit, who's your market? You've got no one else. So you'll find in the environments we actually invest in, it's not just one demographic, not just one industry, not just one socioeconomic group or stereotype, more accurately. It's a broad range. Okay? There's certain age groups or certain family conditions, such as young parents with young kids, young couples, but it's not specific to industry. Okay? So Indianapolis is a great example of that. They've got a range of industries. It's not just burdened by one. There's a lot of different types. Government spending obviously comes back to affect that quite severely as well. Simply for the fact that obviously you want to get into an environment where the county is spending money. You want to see increases to the budget, not decreases. You want to see them spending more on their police forces, more on their environmental services, more on their education, hospitals, things like that. If you're not, they're suffering. Populations aren't getting the services they're looking for. They're obviously going backwards. There are very easy places to find out how much a county is spending on its municipality. It's easy. They will actually make it publicly available. You can see historically what they've obviously been able to pay for, like the last 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 years. You can even go back and see as far as the early 60s and 70s and see obviously growth patterns to how they've actually been able to obviously develop their societies. Dallas actually has some pretty interesting figures, which I'll touch on one of those figure types a little bit later on, but what you're really looking for is a translation as to not just burdening itself with increases to population and therefore obviously just increasing the amount of spending they have to allocate towards education, healthcare, etc. But obviously in an ideal way, they want to stimulate it by putting more into it. I think it was Indianapolis that actually spent around about $9 billion on their downtown area quite recently. It looks amazing. It is beautiful. It's right around this canal. There's a lot of public works that have gone down there. There's a lot of attractions for the community to come out of their house, down to the community to spend money, to put back into the society. Those are the sort of contributors that you're looking for. One thing, obviously, that you're also going to be touching on in pretty severe ways is the geographic data. Now, geographic data can actually refer to a lot of things, depending on who you're talking to. Surveyors will obviously, they'll bore you to tears with this. If you get a good surveyor, they'll obviously give you sort of like a town planner perspective. They'll actually, what they'll pretty much do is they'll tell you exactly where this city's going to grow in the coming years. Now, there is a city in Canada which borders an Indian reservation, for example. Along that Indian reservation is some of the most expensive land in that city because it can't grow any further. You'd actually have to approach that Indian reservation and get permission to build there, and that just won't happen. But interestingly enough, it's probably some of the, I would consider to be the ugliest properties in that city. It's old. Like it's that close into the city. These are old properties. It's very centrally located. You've got great public transport to and from it. Brilliant schools around the corner. One of the best secondary schools, senior secondary schools in the city. All the variables are there, but it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no further growth. There's no more infrastructure going out that way. It's interesting to know that if you put that in any other society that where we're from, in Australia, you're just expecting that they're just going to bulldoze that paddock. They're going to knock down that church. They'll take out and fill that quarry, just so they can obviously build more property. It's just the way that we are built as Australians to understand investment. In the US and some other parts of the world, it's not the way that they do it. This obviously touches on to the actual point of infrastructure. Are you in a position whereby who flew in to Las Vegas, for example? Most of us? Everyone else walked? Okay. You'd actually see it. I'm not sure if anyone's conscious when they're actually landing or looking out the windows, specifically to the southwest of the city. Massive tracts of land that they actually zoned previously for large-scale, basically, development. This isn't for tiny little houses, 2 and 3 bedroom. These are McMansions. These are massive places with sprawl and pools and tennis courts and everything out there. When the economy suffered, theoretically died, those plans just went to the hills. Nothing's happened to them ever since. They're just still there. There's roads, there's light poles, there's power, there's gas, there's water. Everything's there, but no one wants to build there. They're in the process now of making that from the zoning that it was to a medium to high density zoning, which means the socio-economic group that was going to live there is going to change. Theoretically, it's on the far, far corners of the city. The people that will live there, because it'll be cheap, will be, once again, a slightly lower socio-economic class. Okay, they may not have sustainable employment because they're in a tourism society. Okay, so that'd be a volatile place to invest. If you wanted to actually take the same genre of society, yet have them somewhere closer to where they might be able to find employment, such as working here, for example, you'd obviously be in a better position to make the same investment. It's the same type of tenant, different location, stronger return. Does that make sense? See how it's not really a science? And see how it's going to change in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And it will continue to change. Because their kids are going to go through school, different education, different employment, make more of an income, might buy a bigger house. This is why it will always and continuously change. You look at some of the places that we previously sold in Indianapolis, for example, duplexes, triplexes, etc. Back in the day, these were mansions. These were, 1920, 1930 mansions. But the times changed, the demographics moved. People that obviously moved out of those areas, dispersed their wealth, were replaced by other people who saw an opportunity. It's a big space, no one wants, let's put 3 or 4 times as many people in there, make 3 or 4 times as much money, very successful. One of our leading types of property investment style. Okay, and that's obviously one of the main types of investment that most of our members who bought in Indianapolis seem to enjoy, is the duplex model for obvious reason. One thing obviously, again, is the affordability to renter. Do you think it's going to be affordable for a person living out in the southwest of this city in a reasonably good or brand new property for them to transport themselves from there to here every single day for work? Probably cost them $5 to $10 a day just to get back and forward, or is it going to be cheaper and easier for them to spend $1 or even walk from just around the corner? Bearing in mind, around about 75 to 78% of Americans drive to work. Okay, that's the employable force. And that's taking every socioeconomic group. Okay, people that drive beaters of cars, by the way. So once again, I hate to sound snobby, but from an investment perspective, you just need to be. So what we're looking for, apart from a good deal, is economic indicators. Now, once again, this could have been foreseen back in the days when Bill Clinton's government actually took away the shield that was in place from the 50s when the banks were regulated. When the banks were deregulated and all of a sudden they could trade whatever they wanted with whoever they wanted, that's simplified very heavily, of course, that was an indicator that something bad would eventually happen. There was going to be a factor of greed that needed to be controlled by either the banks, the government, or a certain individual being the president. That wasn't going to come about. You're in a capitalist society. They're all about stimulating and creating the wealth. Without capitalism, this wouldn't be here. Caesars wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. Because we'd have to work ourselves to death just to be able to sustain this type of income, or have 50 minions working for us to get us this type of income. Slavery, luckily, being illegal, we don't. So we have to obviously leverage ourselves, finance ourselves, inherit money, win lotto, win at the tables, just to make a bit of a fortune. Either that, or obviously, we learn smartly to invest and obviously borrow from the strengths of others, similar to what we do with the 2 solid guys in the back there, who were distracted by Lou's winning stories at the tables last night. We're obviously looking for, I'm just going to flick through these, we're going to bring them up. I really want to get Ben and Tyler up here really quickly, because I know they've got stuff to do for me tonight. Lots and lots of stuff to do for me tonight. So these are just some of the other areas that we're going to be obviously touching on as you're looking for different types of investment strength. You're looking for different types of growth rates. We've seen massive declines, obviously, in the areas of employment, on the areas of exchange, in the areas of, you name it, government employment, even education systems. Like everything in the US has been tanking pretty heavily since pretty much 07, 08. Whoops. Yay. Yeah, thanks, man. I get a point for that. Like, when I'm saying tanking, obviously we saw spike periods, so we saw obviously the increases coming up, but then we've just been watching this. In some areas, we're starting to see this now, but it's also riveting. It's also spiking and dropping, spiking and dropping. The interest rates, the exchange rates, for example, we've been watching those, bump up to $1.10. I think we got to almost $1.11 at some point against the Australian, dropped it back down to about 96, 97 cents. Best time to bring your capital back from the US, obviously. But now we're sitting around about 102, 103. Okay, and it's just going to keep doing this. Jamie speculates up to about $1.20. Some of the other people I've spoken to, $1.30, sometimes even a little bit higher. But once again, who's to say? There are so many contributors to this sort of an environment. It's obviously difficult to gauge on a longer perspective. That's why we need exchange rate stability. You could argue that right now we have exchange rate stability. Now, at the same time, you could also argue that it's probably the most volatile exchange rate we're going to have for quite some time. Simply for the fact that we don't actually know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't trade. I rely on people similar to Lou, my Apex guys, my Halifax guys, my other guys, my Lloyds of London. They tell me all sorts of perspectives. You know what the funniest thing is? And these people are, MBA qualified. They've got doctorates. They've talked to, governments and council. They're all different. If we all knew what was going to happen, they'd all have the same perspective. So this is why it becomes more of an art. It's not a science. You have to take a certain speculative into this market. While we have this window, therefore, let's take it. If we get back down to that 78, 75 parity level, that's going to be a different economy altogether. We won't have the same benefits of this opportunity. You're looking at, obviously, basically the health of the environment you're getting into as well. You're looking at a very, very rigid financial system in the US right now, a very, very rigid political system. You can barely even open a bank account unless you've got the right people doing it for you, unless you're in this country. Okay, so it tells you right away that you're in a different world. It's not the same capitalist greed world that we were in years ago. This is an environment where they're not just looking out for their own citizens, they're looking out for you. Okay, because you're actually stimulating their economy. By you coming in and actually getting a benefit of a great investment, you're actually stimulating an economy which is going to improve your investment. Does that make sense? It does, doesn't it? Now, the other point being here, the liquidity of the market. What would people's perception be of the current state of the property market in the US? How liquid do you think it is? Illiquid. Illiquid, brilliant. Mainly for the fact of?
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, as in the banks are holding back most of the supply. Correct. Now, this is another benefit to you, because the banks who hold or had held most of the debt relating to the properties is the fact that they are controlling how much your investment's worth by obviously releasing the stock to you in gradual form and obviously giving you a perspective where you can take a great deal on a property, but at the same time doing it in a gradual, measured way. Instead of throwing 3 million dead properties into the market, basically pushing them down so you basically are getting paid to take them, they're obviously making sure that you're getting basically just below fair market value on them. So you're basically paying just that little bit below what somebody else in the market would happily snap it up for. Why aren't they? Why isn't an American citizen picking up one of these properties at these prices? That's probably the second common question I get from someone who's before a member. Anyone want to hazard a guess at why people aren't buying this in America? What's that, sorry? Burnt fingers. So they can't sign on the dot because their fingers are burnt? Yeah. They've got burnt, bingo. I've said to a couple of people here, and I think it was in my packet that I gave out to most people, don't go around telling people you're here to buy their properties. Because they had a lot of pain. This is their mums, their dads, their brothers, their sisters, their own. They suffered a lot. And they take it very personally. They don't understand that we're here to benefit their economy on a macro sense. They see it as though we're here to take advantage of them. Do you want to just pull that door shut while I'm talking about taking away your property? Sorry. Thank you, my friend. That's okay. Just people don't bank of clothes. That's fine. That's brilliant. Of course, what we're really getting into in a perspective, obviously, having a look at most of the markets when we invest and most of these markets where we're taking property, is an environment whereby that we can obviously attain certain levels of control. We obviously know that we're not going to be put in a position where the property is going to severely decline again, because those protection elements are in place. The market obviously isn't in a position where it's going to do radical things to you overnight. The competition that you would perceive, as in the residential market here or the local potential owners here, aren't competing with you for these properties yet. They can't get financed. They don't have confidence in the market. The exchange rates, which we think are phenomenally cheap, and if we could get them, we would take them in a heartbeat, they think are high. Price is the most expensive for fuel at this stage, $3 a gallon. To them, that's high. You know, to us, it's not so much. Cost of living I'll go into in just a minute here, but the real crux of it being, what we're really trying to do is understand interest rates, obviously, which I jump forward all the time, which I tend to do, is the fact that there are so many different elements, you can't really pinpoint to just one and say, I'm just going to wait till the exchange rate, to the forward interest rate, get to a position where everyone can afford one, because that's when the market's going to start to spike back up. Because there are so many other factors that will come to benefit before that actually happens. Okay, one of those factors obviously being we're looking at environmental policies. So when the economic environmental policy surrounding the actual wholesale lending, so what banks are actually able to go into the marketplace, and I'm talking to Europe, to Australia, to Southeast Asia, and borrow money from insurance companies, hedge fund managers, whoever it is, to loan to their retail market, that's going to set a different environmental policy in regards to the economic status of what they can attain now. To do that, there's got to be confidence. Right now, next to zero confidence. You'd probably put in that single digits out of a percentage of 100. You're obviously looking at the repatriating of capital. People who have lost previously 50, 60, 100,000, $300,000, $500,000 on a home, how likely do you think they are ever to buy another home? Ever? Slim to none. Slim to none. It's the psychology. You get burnt that hard, rent. Structure it in a way, class it as your office, deduct it. You'll find a way. Imagine if that was your home, they classed as an office and rented for you for 20 years. You'd be a pretty happy investor. Another reason we're here. The other point being, obviously, you're looking at so many other variables to control here. Taxes on your capital gains, that's something that we have an amazing amount of leverage on. Everyone seems to get this fear factor about the taxes and obviously the issues that can potentially arise from that. Let's say you sell your $50,000 property, you make 100 grand off it. You were going to bring that back to Australia. Let's say, for example, you'd be paying capital gains on 100 grand, theoretically, unless you actually reinvested that 100 grand back into the market, bought 200 grand worth of property here in the US, use the income from that, basically drawn out of your LLC as basically a supplementary income for an Australian structure you have, and then deduct all of that. There are so many different ways, and I can't touch on that any further because I'm not licensed to give you financial advice. However, there is a terrific accountant in the US that we will direct you to who will give you amazing resolution for all of these elements. They're just phenomenal. So don't be afraid of taxes or anything else that might be perceived as a rigid element that you can't control, because you can. Every single part of this investment system you can control. You're obviously looking at so many different issues here, and I'll touch on through them because I really want to bring the lads up before they get too distracted with other deals they're doing. Speed and reliability of dispute settlement systems. This is another fear factor. What happens if my tenant becomes a pain in the butt? What happens if I don't like my property manager? What happens if my place burns down? What happens if, et cetera, et cetera? Worst case scenario. What options have you got to be able to resolve it? You know, what is your strength here? Apart from people like myself and the rest of the team that generally don't sleep, it's mainly a factor that you've got other people in this country that are here specifically to look after you. They weren't doing that job. We've got 50 others to replace them, you know. The strength of this sort of a relationship is making sure that you're looked after, because it's the same system that Jamie, myself, and other members of this company are actually investing in ourselves. That's why we're up here telling you about it, because we've got that much confidence in it, and because we actually stand behind it. Years before I actually came to 21st Century, I probably wouldn't have told you any of my contact details, because you guard them like it's your life. At this stage, I'll give you everybody, because I've got that confidence, I've got that knowledge. I'll give you everybody, except for any member of my family, because they're mine, they don't charge me. Degree of political protection and investor rights. This is obviously a fear factor when you're looking at other economies where people have invested before. Foreign Investment Review Board in Australia, I think, is the easiest way to explain this to you, where if a foreign national came to our country and they wanted to buy a certain class of asset, that had to be approved by the Foreign Investment Review Board. 9 times out of 10, depending on the level of investment, they'll be rejected, depending on the structure, depending on the purpose. Right now, China is buying up amazing amounts of rural land for agricultural purposes, but there are very strange dealings just for them being allowed to do that. In regards to the US, people have this fear that all of a sudden, what if the US government changes their mind and takes the property away from us? They can't, because you don't own the property. An American company does. Make sense? Okay? They can't control who works for that company. Literally can't. If they changed their LLC system, for example, and said no more foreign nationals, they'd actually have to bring in a more enforcing policy to kick out all of their illegal workers, which therefore would actually just cripple their economy. It's in the millions of population that are actually not here legally that work, that sustain this economy. The people who clean your rooms, which I'm hoping are being very, very well tipped, because you're from Australia, you've got to set a good example, they're probably not here legally. You know, it's not really for us to speculate about green cards, but potentially that's actually happening. They weren't here, who would do it? Don't look at me like that, I'm not cleaning your room. These are just some of the indicators, obviously, of how much it costs per state to live. Oh, crikey. Okay, so the ones that I've highlighted are 3 areas that we're investing in right now. And if you look at the 2 big towers over there, you're looking at DC, one of the places I got property, and the other one being New York. Most expensive places to live. Anyone want to speculate why? Property prices? What's another factor aside from property prices? What's a good... Centers of finance and government, as in basically an endless supply of stable employment, endless supply of stable demand. You look at some of the other areas here, I mean, look at for LA, right there. Why do you think that'd be in the negative? It's LA. Anybody? Sorry, I'm actually talking about the wrong one. Why do you think, where are we here? I was actually going for the wrong one. California, this one here. This one and then +5. I knew that was going to be wrong. Why do you think it's only at 5? It's actually got a higher driver economy than New York. High taxes. High taxes in bingo, yeah. Federal 10%, land tax is high. Every other type of tax is higher. And it has a faster growing population than any of these states. That rate of living is actually going to become expensive or cheaper? There we go. Okay, I'm going to keep going to you. You're my main guy at the moment. This is the thing that, you know, even though this is actually happening today, 2012, you'll see it in every slide that I actually get these sort of figures from. I'm going to give you the information. You can go off and source it for yourself. Anybody that's spoken to me at length, once again, I apologize. But it's the case that I will point you in the direction of independent data to verify what I'm saying. Okay? Because you've got to go off and research yourself. Whether you like to or not, you don't have to. I'll tell you everything you need. But if you really want to be able to assert yourself as an independent investor, just spend 5 minutes on the site. Look at a pretty little graphic like this. If you can be bothered, read the 5,000 words of text below it, because it'll actually paint a greater picture. And it'll tell you what's happening today in 2012. I think this is around about April. But obviously, you should come back every year. Just keep an eye on it. Before you know it, you're standing up here in Las Vegas talking to a bunch of lovely people and getting paid for it. It's phenomenal. So we look at other pets that we're actually investing in right now, and it's cheaper to live there than in most of the other areas, except for Texas. Why? I'll stop putting pressure on you. That's not fair of me, really, is it? It's landmass, per capita landmass. It is actually one of the biggest countries inside the country. That's a good point. But it also have bigger drivers to their economy. Like obviously, apart from their oil and gas, yeah. There's a lot of other points. Here's an interesting fact. I think I've mentioned this to a couple of people. Is it the B2 Spirit Bomber, B5 Spirit Bomber? I can't remember which one. There's a part of that plane made in every single American state. And they, instead of making it all in just one state and making it a lot easier logistically, they spread it out amongst 50, technically 48 lower. Not sure if they make it in Alaska and Hawaii, but they probably do. But definitely in the 48, because if Congress ever wanted to stop making that, save money in the billions of dollars per plane, it'd affect every single state, every single voting constituent for Congress to do that. That's why the manufacturers enforce that they basically have to build that plane in every single corner of that country. Okay? There are certain nuances to this economy that actually are just unbelievably entwined. So where you've got strengths and weaknesses to another economy, you've got greater potential in others. Now, excuse me, cost of living is, if it's cheaper to live somewhere, most people are obviously inclined, if they're that desperate, to move there for that specific purpose. If it's got better employment ratios in the state that they may have lived in or previously lost a job in, if it's got a range of other beneficial factors that obviously point in the direction of being just an overall better economy for growth in, such as it's cheap to get there, and it's obviously cheap to live there, it's cheap to drive around there, certain costs are actually covered by the government, fuel's actually covered by the government in some places. A whole bunch of reasons why it might actually be more attractive to live in West Virginia than as opposed to, let's say, Arizona. Okay, at the same time, there might be other drivers of economy that point us in a stronger direction in a 5-year window. One of the reasons we don't invest here yet, but potentially we will. Okay, here are some other crime statistics that are rather colourful and interesting. And these are only taken right down to about 2010. It's basically from cityrating.com, if you can't see that because of people's heads. Lovely fluffy graphics, and these are actually quite colourful. Now, people have asked me, what about the crime rates? Like, I remember there was a funny question at a seminar we did about a year ago, and someone had looked at a certain type of crime. Now, the only crime that really affects you as a property investor is property crime. People are going to kill each other, they're going to hurt each other, they're going to do some bad things to each other wherever you go. It's almost irrelevant of the per capita ratio that it actually entails. What you focus on is the amount of crime per capita. Those figures on the left-hand side there is per capita cost. So basically just a ratio of what's happening per person. If you're looking at property damage, let's say in Indianapolis, it was 0.011% per capita. So for every one person, it's less than 0.011 likely to happen to that one person. That's a pretty good ratio, wouldn't you agree? It's less than 1%, much less than 1%. It's highly unlikely. But at the same time, you look at some of the other areas aside from Missouri, which is obviously Kansas City. Remember, Kansas City, even though it overlaps Kansas, is actually in Missouri. That's where we invest in it. You look at Indiana, and this is Indianapolis, obviously specifically. This is basically a plateaued effect, but it's only because it's actually got a higher growth ratio to its population. So you'd actually argue to say that that's actually a reasonably acceptable level. You keep going and drop into Texas. That is a phenomenal figure. That's an impressive element. You can actually track that back to certain periods of very, very unstable political, financial, all sorts of variances there that'll actually paint such a crime figure. This isn't something that I've just mashed figures into. This is a cumulative of data from the Bureau of Statistics, census data, a whole range of different sources that have been able to paint this as the most accurate property crime figures in the US up to this period of 2010. And if you look at the steep decline at this point, it could be because Jamie actually left the country at that time. I'm not exactly sure, but it's something we're looking into. The other point being, I'm about to bring the lads up here, so you might want to finish what you're eating and get your butt ready. Thanks, man. The other point being, you actually look at where we're actually investing right now, this could change next month. This could change in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years. 10 years' time, we're not investing here. 10 years' time, we could actually be buying up severe parts of Washington and parts of Seattle. We could be actually touching up in Florida right now, where they're still facing 26% ratio of default. 26% of people will default in the next 12-month period. More than a quarter of that population. It is reliant specifically on tourism. They have other industries there that obviously stimulate their economy. Tourism is the driver. Beautiful properties down there. And if you're actually getting into an environment of property prices of about 800 plus, you're safe. But if you want to spend $800,000 plus and make 15% on that ratio, we can buy 800 grand worth of properties back in Kansas. And all of a sudden you own that city. Although we'd never do that, we'd never put all our eggs in one basket, we'd spread out. We'd probably actually go to North Carolina. Once again, some massive growth there. But all the other variables, Joel, why aren't we investing in North Carolina yet? A couple of reasons. One, the unemployment's not as good as what we wanted. Price is too high. Rental ratios, the vacancy rates are much too high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Taxes are too high. There's a whole cumulative effort that goes into actually summarizing these, right now, are the safest places for us to invest. If you're a lot more aggressive, we can be a lot more aggressive. However, as we're just starting out, it's better if, when you're just starting out, to go somewhere where you're going to be a lot more protected. You're not going to have to worry about your vacancy rates to the highest degree. You're not going to have to worry about someone breaking in and stealing your washing machine. These sort of elements is basically what comes to be able to point these areas as being some of the safest areas to invest right now. You can take it to the other extreme. Who would right now comfortably invest in, I hate to do it to it, but Detroit? Anyone? No one? You type into Google right now, highest rate of property repair or highest repairing rate of property in the US, Detroit. That's the fastest growing market for recovery right now in the US. And like, well, how does that work? It's one of the worst recovering markets, isn't it, surely? No? Bingo. You've been reading my notes or talking to me before, that's awesome. I like it when people listen, that's great. So it's basically hit such a low point that of course it's going to have a higher ratio to actually come back up. Other areas might have done this, and yet they could be at the same point. But they're actually classing this as the highest rate of recovery. Sure it is, look how far it's come. This could be a stronger position because it could have actually gone higher. It could actually have lower tax rates, could have better infrastructure, could have a growing population, could have low, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is obviously, it's not necessarily always going to be an exact formula of science. I'd love to come up here and write x equals y to the power of 5 minus 3, 0, et cetera. It doesn't work like that. This is why you need people who understand the market specific to what you're getting into. These gents up the back, if we were getting into, let's say, Hawaii, I probably wouldn't trust them because I wouldn't see them again, they wouldn't come home, but I'd actually get a local Hawaiian to go through and vet that area for me, and then I'd get a second one to vet that work, and a third one to vet that work, and then I'd get an independent from the other side of the globe to see what they missed, just to make sure they're not being biased to that economy. Does that make sense? Yeah. The main reason for that, obviously, you never rely on one source. You check the URLs that I give you. You go back to these sites that I'll keep referring to month after month. Okay, I'm always going to give you these sites. Anyone actually been to city-data.com? Yay, 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 yay. That's probably one of my favorites because it's an unbiased reference site. It doesn't always have the most up-to-date data. It can be 2 to 3 to 5 years out, but it's obviously going to be able to point you in a direction that's going to give you a sound knowledge of what you're getting into. There are articles from local residents in there. They'll tell you exactly what's good, bad, indifferent about their city. They'll go into ratios of religious positions, companies that work there, amount of government spending, crime statistics, and amount of natural disasters. All the other variables that are good to be able to note, but do you really want to go through that 50 times and compare every single state? Give me 2 minutes. I'll come back and answer the question. The other point being is you also want to be in a position where you can understand this from a broad spectrum, not just summarize that, well, because Detroit's obviously got a faster growing ratio, that's surely where I've got to go and invest. Allowing someone else to come back through and do that sort of work and qualification for you is basically part of the process and why we've actually got this in place for you. When we're actually out on tour, and we're touring specifically, I guess, Kansas City is where we're starting, listening to these two guys at the back, whether we've got some other people with us as well, some of the other specialists in that area, is almost indifferent. The key to it is just their local knowledge and what they'll be able to tell you about how it was 10 years ago, how it is today, and potentially what it's going to look like in 3, 5, 10 years. Okay, and that's the real knowledge you're going to be looking for in investors. Theoretically, if you're holding that property for 10 years, you'd like to know what's happening there in about a decade, wouldn't you? Yeah, unless you flip it out, absolutely. What I'll do now, I'll actually come back very quickly. I'm going to switch over to another colorful type of microphone. I'll answer your question. And then we're going to get Ben and Tyler up because I can see them eagerly looking at their there were iPhones playing Angry Birds. So without further ado, Ben and Tyler, which I'm sure everyone remembers.
First of all, I want to say, yesterday when I got here, I didn't know, and it's my fault, that you guys weren't all at the financial summit, so I didn't introduce myself. So first of all, I'm Tyler. I know I was on stage, had my picture on the slideshow, but just a bit about me. I've been in real estate since 1997-ish, pretty much since I was old enough to, know anything about business or work. I grew up on a farm in the middle of the Midwest, and just kind of learned real estate on my own. I went to college, graduated, kind of learned real estate on my own, had a couple good ideas, was a real hard worker, and then things kind of took off for me in the early 2000s. And as a matter of fact, I don't know, I've never said this before, but I got invited to George Bush, a dinner at the White House. I was one of the 50 most successful business owners under the age of 35 in America. They judged it by revenue, but I grew up with nothing on a farm. To all of a sudden, in 2003, I get a letter. I never told you this probably either. From George Bush, allegedly, probably from one of his staff members, yeah, to go to this meeting. So by the age of 27, I had about $20 million in real estate off doing the same thing. So from $0 to $20 million, this is a true story. At the end of 2007, I had about $0 again. So I learned everything in the school of hard knocks, kind of growing up in real estate. And then lost it all, basically, just because of my own arrogance, really, and my own aggression. So I learned a lot of lessons in the financial crisis. After that thing kind of settled, and I settled my debts with banks and partners and things like that, I start building money again, and here I am so many years later. What is this, 6 years later, 5 years later? And we've got a lot of good things going on. So I'm just a guy who's learned real estate in the school of hard knocks. Every once in a while, I'll read one of these books that these guys write, and I'm always thinking, okay, everything in here is just such common knowledge. So I don't know, I've just learned a lot over the years, and I'm just blessed to actually be here talking to you guys today. What Joel said, a couple of things. Let me break some of this down into layman's terms. Do you want to talk? Or? Go ahead. Okay. Joel's been up here for the last hour and a half while I was sleeping in the back. I kind of heard what he said, but it basically breaks down like this. He's up here telling us about why Dallas is good, why Kansas City's good, why Indianapolis is good, why you want to do business with guys in the local market. It's really just this simple, all right? I've been in America my whole life. The only thing that I care about is real estate. I don't know how to bowl. I can't do anything. The only thing I know how to do is make money in real estate and be a good father. So, for me, it's like eating and breathing. Here's markets that are really bad. Las Vegas has been a little bit bad. There's some other markets like the one up in North Dakota that's a budding market right now that are bad. And here's why those type of markets are bad. Anytime investors come in the boom and invest a lot of money in speculative type investments with no infrastructure, which Joel was kind of talking about, here in Vegas, what's the infrastructure? You got a bunch of drunks come into the casinos who come here seasonally, and you got all the people that work for them. Where's the real economy here? Where are the jobs? Where are the corporations? There's no real long-term stability. People are coming in buying homes. Investors are buying homes, driving up prices. A guy builds a home, and 3 months later, he sells it for $50,000 more. Something's wrong there, okay? That's what happened here. So now this thing's falling off a cliff. Some places like that North Dakota investment with the mine that's booming right now. Okay, great, you buy a trailer park for 50 grand, or 20, 30 grand. You can buy a house for that in a stable economy. So for me, it's a lot easier than, okay, let me look at the charts and do this and do that. From a simplistic standpoint, I just look at what's going on. Other markets, such as Phoenix, is the fifth largest city in America. It's still the third largest growing city in America. So you had values of $200,000, $300,000 that you can now get for 70 grand. Well, my mind just tells me, wait, this is the fifth largest city. It's the third fastest growing city. No one can build a new house in Phoenix until the cost to reproduce of that house at least equals the houses that are 5 years or newer on the market. So you're buying houses for 80 grand that cost 150 to reproduce in the third fastest growing city. Well, my mind just tells me that these prices have to at least appreciate back the cost to reproduce just because the city's growing. So that's why we pick cities like Phoenix. So I really don't look at these numbers. Joel was like, hey, mate, get up there and tell them why you picked these cities. Well, I picked these cities because it just seems like breathing to me. So that's kind of how we pick the cities. Now, how do I pick the cash flow cities? I picked the cash flow cities like Kansas City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, because these cities have always been, which Ben and I said, producers. There's a bunch of stable, large corporations. There's a large blue-collar, low-end white-collar, high-end blue-collar class of people that work their tails off and provide the backbone for the economy. So yeah, these aren't high flyers, but these people pay rent and they have a high rate of return because of the chart of the low cost of living. So the cost of living is really low, the cost to enter houses is really low, but everybody's got a job, so rent's kind of high. It's just that easy. So I've got low entry, I got people who work, and I got high rent. That means cash flow. So these are just the two things. So I don't know about all the stuff Joel just said, and it's all great, it really is. But for me, it's just that simple, if that makes sense.
Some of the macroeconomic data to say, can this city support where it is today? And can we see some moderate rise in this economy as a whole? I mean, or is this city one of these that's just shot full of holes, like Detroit, let's say? I mean, that thing hinges on a thread of one industry. Las Vegas, as you mentioned, Tyler, already hinges on a thread of one industry called entertainment. So while we have some sort of intuitive knowledge about cities and where we want to invest, we're going to look at some of the macro data just to say, okay, we've got XYZ Corporation, we've got this, we've got growth of estimated to be this, we've got unemployment numbers of this. So we do look at some of these things to solidify our own judgment and our own intuition into a city. And can we pin those two together and make it work? Yes. And if we can, yes. And if we can't, no. So that's where we're judging. We go in because we're real estate guys, so we just get out there on the street and we figure some things out. We don't take a huge macro view, but at the end of the day, we do look at some of the underpinnings and say, okay, is this economy going to be good going forward? So. Right,
and Ben's right. I make it sound real simple, but I read these numbers every day, so I know what cities are good and what cities aren't. But to me, it's just very simple. So that's kind of our macro view of how we pick cities. And I'm constantly looking for that new city. And guess what? We're doing the right thing. And this is, I don't know, a good example. I don't know if I want to say this or not. But every fund in America is pounding our doors right now saying, hey, Tyler, guess what? I need 100 properties in Kansas City. I need 100 properties in St. Louis. Okay, well, if you guys are all lining up, beating down the door to buy properties from us, it tells me I'm probably in the right spot. So that's another good sign. But then it's deeper than that. For me, okay, it's not easy to pick a city, but okay, I've picked the city, all right? Well, now what am I gonna do? Let's say I was one of you guys, and I do all the research, I'm looking at everything, I wanna pick the city. Now I get in the city, what do I do to make money? Well, I gotta look around the city and figure out what part of the city is the same thing I said yesterday, that kind of equilibrium spot where I'm not down in the inner city ghetto where I've got prostitution, drugs, crime, but I can't be out in the too nice of an area because my cap rate's gonna be too low. Where's that middle ground, that transition area where I can buy properties and realize the return that I want, okay? So then you have to fly over, really dig your heels in, get to know the cities, all right? Once you've done that, then you gotta figure out how am I gonna buy these type of properties, right? And what we do to buy, and I don't, everybody's always like, well, why would you tell people how you buy? Because I don't care. I mean, I'm more than happy to teach you, come do it. It doesn't bother me. But what we do, we buy at tax sales, mortgage foreclosure sales, straight from the banks and large REO takedowns or large pools of assets that they foreclosed. Because we buy properties in a bunch of different cities, I'm able to go to the bank and say, okay, bank, I'm gonna buy Dallas, Kansas City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Atlanta, and Phoenix. I'll take 1,000 properties. What do you got? They'll sell to us cheap. We go to the tax sales, the mortgage foreclosure sales. These are the type of things that we buy at. And I'd be more than happy to sit here for an hour and teach you how to buy at a tax sale or a mortgage foreclosure sale. And I'll tell you, there's been times where I've bought at tax sales for $200. Houses for $200. I've been in a mortgage foreclosure sale and bought a house for $1 before. This is true. I've had people give me houses. I had a guy give me 10 houses in St. Louis one time. Here you go, just please take these off my hands. So, I mean, you know, we're good at finding properties. And I asked Joel, I said, Joel, you want me to sit up here and teach everybody for 3 hours how to find property? And I can, and I would, if you guys would like me to, some other time or on the trip. If you guys want to do on the trip, every city we go to, I'll teach you, hey, in this city, here's the best way to buy. I don't mind doing that, but it's just, I don't mind teaching the process one, but what I want you to know is, here's how we do it to have a competitive advantage. We find the city, we've got a little competitive advantage when we buy, and we try to pass that thing on to the buyers. If we have time, I'll teach, but I don't know what kind of time we got.
I think we've got another, what, 45 minutes or so?
We'll do that on the tour.
Okay,
think,
well, I don't mind. I mean,
and
but
we got
it's
some
pretty
tables to
interesting. I
play.
mean, who doesn't want to know? In America, I mean, let me just give you the long and short, all right? In America, tax sales, all right? This is one way that we buy. I love it. It's interesting to me. In a lot of states that you go to, these states will have what they call county property taxes. You guys are going to have this on your property. Generally, if you're in a big county, that county will wait 3 years to foreclose on you for non-payment of taxes. The way the laws work in America, if you've gone 3 years without paying your county property tax, which is basically a state tax, that county can then put your house up for auction, basically for what the back taxes are. So anybody who's just bought a property like cottages, how much are the taxes a year? $700? Something like that. So $700 times 3 years was $2,100 plus 10% interest. Let's call it $2,500 for round numbers. The county will throw your property up if you don't pay taxes in 3 years for $2,500. Well, who doesn't want to go down to the county and buy that same house for $2,500? Well, other investors come in and try to do this, but I'll tell you, when I was 18, some guy told me, he said, you can go down to the county and buy property for the back taxes. I was like, really? So I was like, how do you do that? He said, well, there's a paper that you look in. You just go in there and you go bid on them. So I'm going down there. I'm seeing $200, $150, $300. So I'm bidding on properties left and right. I have no idea what I'm doing. I bought like 25 lots that were worth nothing. Thought they were houses. So, you learn the hard way. But yeah, we buy like that. I mean, usually the houses that go back for back taxes are in really bad shape. They need $25,000, $30,000 in rehab. But still, it's a house for $200, $300.
And the other thing, too, is when we buy them, we have to sit there and hold them for almost 8 months sometimes.
Usually the way it works is there's a redemption period. So you buy a property at a tax sale. 4 months later, you go to a judge, and he either says, you know what, I confirm this sale because you haven't paid your taxes, or I'm going to set this sale aside. There was an extenuating circumstance. The mother had cancer.
They came up with some reason to extend the hearing and all that. So
at that point, then you'll get a deed. Then all of a sudden you can start working on the property. Start working on the property, you go from there. But this is a whole nother, business model, just how to buy at taxes or mortgage foreclosure sales. When someone doesn't pay a mortgage, that property gets put up on the courthouse steps and you have the ability to go down and buy that property. You have to pay cash that day. Just today in Kansas City, we bought one for $30,000. It was a really nice property. It's probably going to rent for $850. It needs about 10 in work. These are just real numbers. I'm an honest guy. So, there's good houses to buy like that. And when we go to Kansas City, where your hotel's at, is going to be 2 blocks from the courthouse. I'm just going to take you down there at the time of a sale maybe and say, here's how you buy at a sale. And that really might be something interesting to do. Just because, this is a small group of people, maybe we can teach. So
I'll be able to do a little bit more. Yeah.
Maybe.
I guess the other thing on how we buy, Tyler, we do buy at the tax foreclosures and some of the different auctions. In fact, we were just in Indianapolis last week. We bought 9 new duplexes in Indianapolis at the surplus auction sale. So that was a good, I wanted to buy a little bit more there, but that's what we got. Some of the hard things about buying at these foreclosures things too, there's almost zero due diligence that we can do because we know sometimes 48 hours max in advance of when these properties are coming. It's the day before in the paper, okay, this thing's gonna be auctioned in 2 days. We have a list, our guys are running around. We can't get access into the properties, so we're just looking through windows and trying to make our best assessment. And so every one of these deals is an educated guess for us. So it'd be tough for somebody to not be intimate with the areas or intimate with properties, construction, and these types of things to be able to go in and look through a dirty window and say, yeah, this thing's worth 15 grand or whatever, And this is the scope of work we have to do. So we have to always kind of go into those deals and worst case scenario on all of our costs and expenses and rehab and everything going into it. So that's just another sort of hiccup or inconvenience with buying it some of the ways that we buy. But we're here on the ground.
We don't get clear title either. That's the other thing. You don't get clear title.
We don't get clear title.
That's the other problem with those places.
That's right. There's no nothing with clear title. You get something in the mail that says, here you go. Yeah. There's no title insurance policy. There's none of the things that we do. So sometimes we lost big on a deal last year. We lost almost 14 grand on a deal. There was just they had changed the way they do these auctions where we used to be able to get IRS liens removed, personal IRS liens. They'll attach them to the property. Well, if it was a personal lien and not a property-related lien, we used to be able to go in and get these things stripped off and removed. Well, the IRS, new administration, whatever the case may be, taxes aren't going down, they're going up. So the restriction of these things attaching to property, and we just got completely blindsided by it and had to pay it, and the deal was the deal. So that was another, again, just as another thing to look at when we're buying in some of these alternative methods that we buy in. What are some of the other, maybe Tyler, when we talked about, as you know, with this high cash flow product, we're looking for the value, the strike value, and we're looking for the rent. We're looking for that magic thread of the neighborhood where we're on a good side of the neighborhood, but our values are still relatively low comparatively to the city as a whole, where our rents are starting to be comparatively higher. So there's this blend in every market, and difficult to sit here in Las Vegas on a stage and really tell you this. A lot easier for us to go out and actually see the cities. Who's not going on the tour? I guess who's Joel wants.
Thank God.
You want to stay here in Vegas?
Thank you.
So, I guess whoever's not on the tour, and maybe there's some other things that you guys want some more detailed explanation of. We're going to come on for a little bit again tomorrow, but here we are right here and now. Let's talk about whatever it is that open-ended questions for anyone that wants a question answered.
Well,
Unless
we
there's a
even
few other things
no, but
before
I'm
you
saying
wanna-
that's a good idea. But before we even do that, the beauty of this thing is, since you guys are all going to these places, we get a lot of intimate time with you guys. This is a smaller group than we've ever had before, so I like intimate time. So,
I like it too. We can sort of break down a little bit of the quote unquote formalities, and we can just speak more intimately with each other. And here's what the deal is: you're going to meet the managers. You're going to be able to kick the grass on your house if that's what you want to do. So it's nice. We've been to a few of these. We speak a little bit, and it's always more of a big, grand type ballroom sort of thing, and so it's nicer to be here.
The way this used to work in America, when those TV programs were being filmed, was like in the early 2000s. I'd say 2002 to 2006. All right. Back in America, then the market was so hot. All right. There were so many buyers in America. The problem, which became now not a problem, but an asset or a benefit for us, is the fact that everybody in the world, I used to own a mortgage company, and we used to joke in the office all the time, you bring somebody with a social security number, which is how we tag people in America, and a heartbeat in, and I'll get them a loan, which was true. If you had a social security number, I didn't care if you were a bum off the street with no income, you'd get a loan. So the market was so hot, everybody's getting loans, trillions of dollars coming into the market. So all these wannabe investors, guys who come in and I'm going to buy a property here through a real estate agent or from a wholesaler who's really not a wholesaler, he's a retailer, would come in, buy a property, spruce it up a little bit. That shows about buying, sprucing up, and selling to homeowners. Well, that was easy. Anybody in the world could have done that because whatever I bought today in 60 days would be 10% more in value. It didn't matter if you were the biggest idiot on the planet. The market's going up. I don't care what you do. So at that time, everybody was doing that. Why don't more people do it now? I'll tell you why. Because no banks will loan on it. There's not one bank in America right now because we do this. We're one of the biggest operators in this country. And every bank that used to loan to guys like us who go in and buy cheap, rehabilitate, and then resell, they won't loan to guys like us because they overdid it and loaned to too many people who didn't know what they were doing and got their toes stubbed so bad that now they won't loan to guys like us to do it. One. Two, there is no way to get an in loan. So in that show, you're just waiting for somebody to come in with a heartbeat and a credit score, slap a loan on their face and say, here you go, buy my property for 20% more than it was worth 60 days ago, not because I'm some brilliant guy, but because my market's running up so fast because all the idiots on Wall Street are just dumping money as fast as they can in anybody's pocket. So you say, why didn't more people do it? Everyone did it. And when I was growing up and doing my thing then, I'd go to the restaurant and every time I sat down, people would say, what do you do? I'd say, well, I'm a real estate investor. Well, me and the other 30 guys at the bar, and it used to anger me because I would think I'm really doing this thing and these other guys are just wannabes. Now they aren't in business and I still am. So you say, why isn't everybody doing it? They were, it's just a different climate. That's an old show, if that makes any sense.
The business
and those guys don't even do it anymore. You know what they do? They get up on stage and say, here's my package, pay me $20,000 so I can teach you how to buy cheap, rehab, and sell. They don't even do it anymore because they don't know how to do it.
Guys that used to do real estate, it got harder. Infinitely harder. Guys that are making it in the real estate business now, and we've been at this for a few years again, coming back up. It was super hard when we first started, but we knew we had a good enough foresight to say this is where the market is. It always goes in cycles, we can start here. Yeah, we're going to have our sleeves rolled up, working real hard. But here's how this thing works. Here's the market. Here's the cycle coming back up. And we're starting to see the first beginnings of this stabilization and the uplift, which is coming. So part of the reason why, and we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but there's a lot of these funds, these hedge funds, these Wall Street guys. Same thing they did back again when they ran it up. They ran it up more on the loan and mortgage foreclosure side, but now they're running it up on the buy side. So what Wall Street's trying to do, just so you guys know, it's not an insider stock tip or anything, but what Wall Street is doing is they're creating a new asset class called single-family residential property, and they're going to be holding that for a few years and then releasing it out into the secondary market where people are going to be buying this thing in big packages and notes and just like a mutual fund type thing. So anyway, that's where it's headed. We had enough foresight to sort of say, look, we can work hard now. We're going to see this thing come around, so that's where we're at. You guys are in an extremely good position because your currency exchange, you're here, you're still relatively, we're still sort of at the bottom of this thing coming back up. So sweet spot for you guys before the big, I think there's going to be a run up here over the next few years. So.
And it's what Ben said, and I put this on the stage at the Financial Summit. I'm going to draw it two ways. But real estate, to me, like everything in life, just runs in cycles. No matter what it is, if it's the option market, real estate, bonds, stocks, whatever it is, it just runs hot and cold. So guys that used to work for me, we used to do one thing 10 years ago, then we did another thing 5 years ago, and now we do a different thing. They branch off and try to do their own little section of what I was doing before. And then 2 years later, they're not making any money. They're like, oh, Tyler, what are you doing now? Because our business model doesn't work. Well, I know it doesn't work because no model works forever. So it all runs in like this circular cycle to me. There's highs and lows, peaks and valleys. So what works here doesn't work here. What works here doesn't work here. What works here doesn't work here. How do I navigate this? I can never beat this, but I can try to just ride the wave. So what's going on right now? My Australian dollars, who knows? What is it, Kartik? I knew you'd have it. 1 point what? 0 what? 0.25. And so, and our U.S. real estate is still the lowest that it's been, although we're bouncing off the bottom. What we were talking about 12, 16 months ago, it's starting to bounce. Yeah. So these are two things that are just facts, all right? So what can we do in this type of market and with these type of things to capitalize on this? Well, if we've got cash and strong buying power and we can buy product right now while it's cheap, while we have all these foreclosures on the market, why wouldn't we do that? You know, that's what we're just cash buyers too. The only reason that I get great deals is because the bank calls me up and says, hey, Tyler, I got 1,000 houses in Kansas. Can you take them? I'm the only guy that says, yeah, you know what? I've got cash. Here I come. Because everybody else, they don't have cash. They don't have it. So cash is king right now. We have cash. I wish my dollars in my bank were worth 1.03, whatever, 25, but they're not. So that's where the power is for me. So right now we're taking advantage of that thing. And you say, yeah, is the market turning? Right before I walked into this room, I just got off the phone with a large fund who said, Tyler, we're trying to value, this is the exact conversation I had, we're trying to value Kansas City and Indianapolis, and we heard you were the guy. They put me through to this conference call. And I was like, yeah, they're trying to value it on cap rates and how much money they want to spend. They're trying to spend $1 billion in Kansas City and Indianapolis, and they want to know what cap rate they should be buying on. Yeah. So that tells me right there, I mean, they've been tracking me down all day. I mean, I told you about this outside. That just tells me right there we're probably doing the right thing, because this guy's telling me he's going to spend $1 billion. He's like, how fast can you get us $1 billion worth of houses? I'm like, well, it's going to take a while, but I mean, we're obviously going
Funny
right.
that you said the guy that called right before you walked in, right before I walked up. You remember Steve out of Hawaii? Mm-hmm. Okay, we were flirting with them on some, they're a big $1 billion fund too. He just called a second ago. He goes, hey, that package you were talking about is still on? I said, sorry, mate, we closed it last week. You snooze, you lose. He's like, God. You know, so those guys are back online, by the way. We haven't talked about that yet.
But nevertheless, all we're saying is we're in a good market. I mean, it keeps getting better. Phoenix was good. Kansas City's good. And I don't, you know, here's what I really hate, to be honest with you guys. I don't like to get up here and sell this stuff. And I'm not even trying to sell it to you. I love real estate like more than anything on this planet. It took me from being a farm boy who had no money. My mom can't hardly read or write. My dad's just some good man who had nothing, and now they own. I buy their houses. I pay for their cars. My daughters go to a nice school, and I love real estate. I walk downtown here. I'm looking at the buildings. I'm thinking, how can I build this? Who owns this? How can I have this? All I look around all day long is price per square foot, price per square foot. I mean, I'm sizing this whole place up. I just love it. It's what I do. And I'm not trying to even sell you guys anything. I'm just saying, so I hate to even feel like a salesman, as I'm not. I'm just talking about my life. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Your business.
Someone just came to me and asked me about estate taxes.
Yes,
if I pass away, what happens?
Thank you.
Okay, listen. If you're like a complete idiot and one of the biggest morons on the planet, you'll hold all these properties in your name, okay? And then when you die, America will come and they'll take half of it. I think it's 50, 60%. Do what they want with it, and they'll try to pass it on to somebody else for you, okay? And at the same token, when you're holding it in your name, if someone slips and falls and breaks their neck and they come try to sue you, although you're in a good position because you're not an American, what are they really going to do? But if you're an American, you hold it in your name and someone tries to sue you, that's not very smart. So what we do, which seems like I just thought everybody did this, someone just asked me this, we hold it in American LLCs. So you have an American LLC, you have an operating agreement set up, which is basically, here's what the ownership of my LLC looks like. And in that operating agreement, you can put things in there that say, my name's Jane Smith, and I have a son named Bob Smith, and when I pass away, Bob Smith gets 100% of the shares in my operating agreement. And then there's no estate tax, no nothing, it's zero. So when someone said to me, I was like, okay, why would you ever hold a property in your name? I didn't even think, I don't know, I just thought that was a crazy question. But there is no estate tax if you have an LLC and you've got your paperwork set up. If you don't and you own it in your name, most definitely you're in a very, very, very exposed position, and you cannot do that.
We heard through the grapevine that you guys got hit with the 55 or whatever.
I didn't hear that. Someone just asked me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Estate tax thing that you're getting nailed with. No, not the case. Not the case at all.
The elements, whether you're in the desert where we are now, or whether you're in the north where there's a lot of snow and it's really cold, they do come into play. But you just have to know what building materials to use, how to adjust that house in a certain way to make it weatherproof, which Ben just said. We just use the PEX plumbing. It's plastic. It expands. So you don't want to have your pipes bust, one. Two, the style of roofing that we use and things like that are made to hold up for a little bit colder conditions. And any of the areas we're in only have a 2-month winter, really. It snows a lot and gets really cold, but it's not enough to really matter. Now,
Nothing like Alaska.
That's what I was about to say. In Alaska, I'd be a little worried, but none of the areas we've been in, I've ever worried about weather. I mean, even when you go further south, like the Phoenix, you had to have the proper kind of roofing and the proper kind of stucco there. As long as you build right, you know, these things can all be taken into account because it's never that extreme anywhere, you know?
Do you rehab all of your properties to Sector 8 compliance requirements? And can you tell us about what those Sector 8 compliance requirements are, please?
Section 8 is, yeah, that's right. That's the government.
Section 8.
Section 8 is a HUD, urban and HUD development program that's assistance for some of the lower income tenants. What they have is a very stringent, what is this checklist? It's like 5 or 6 pages of a checklist they go through on these initial inspections. The tenant will have a book that's given to them once they pass all these qualifications to go through the program. They get approved, they get this booklet, we call it an RTA. And they take this RTA and they go find a property. Once they find a property, they say, okay, here you guys, I like this property at 123 Main. Here's my application, will you accept it? And then we take it and then we walk it through the rest of the process. Part of the process, once we've accepted the tenant, we go through the motion here, they'll call and they'll do an inspection. So they'll come through and do an inspection. We're talking about lead-based paint, or is the footing stable, is there handrails everywhere there needs to be, is there proper ventilation in everywhere, is there just, you know, if there's anything, if there's any peeling paint at all, they'll cross you out for that. Is the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, all these things up to par. And it's a pretty rigid inspection. Like I said, it's 5 or 6 pages they go through and what's the heating source, what's this, what's that, and they test everything. And if we fail, if any one of these things is not perfectly right, they just fail you. They don't say, well, you've passed all but this one thing. They just fail you. So that's obviously we want to tenant and lease the property, so that's a big deal to us. Everything has to be up to par on that. Tyler, any comments?
The process, yeah, it's just what Ben said. It's 3 pages, electrical outlets, exposed wires, lead-based paint, handrails. Is the roof good? Is the HVAC good? Are the windows open and closed? I mean, they're pretty stringent on it, but then we do another inspection report that's 10,000 times more stringent than that. These guys have like, I mean, literally 3,000 things they look at on a house. Like, is this pebble out of place here? Actually, it's annoying to me. But yeah, I mean, they ran through 2 inspections, a property inspection and Section 8.
Sometimes our contractors...
But we don't do everything to Section 8. We don't do everything to Section 8. Like our Dallas product, the neighborhoods are the houses are 3 times as much. So it's a little bit different. They're Section 8 compliant too, but we just don't do Section 8 there, if that makes any sense.
Is a lot of Section 8 in Kansas?
Yeah, Kansas City. I hate it when people say Kansas. Listen, I'm from Missouri, all right? And there's a state right next to Missouri called Kansas. Kansas City's in the middle of it. So guys from Missouri just don't like guys from Kansas. I don't know if it's like this anywhere in Australia where there's 2 states that butt. So when people say Kansas, I'm sorry, but it's Missouri. But yeah, Kansas City, we do a lot of Section 8. Yes, a lot of it. Kansas City, Indianapolis, Section 8. Dallas right now, open market. Okay, asbestos, especially on commercial buildings, is very highly regulated right now in America. The only type of asbestos that would ever be in, around, or on any of these houses is going to be on the shingles on the outside. There's an old composite, it's called chrysolite or chrysotile asbestos. It's a real compact type of asbestos shingle that was built in the 50s and 60s. Actually, they still make it today. They've just kind of tweaked the composition a little bit. But they're still up to EPA, which is America's version of safety for Americans. They're all up to EPA standards. And then the only other asbestos is going to be in the ducts. Like in the old ductwork, they're wrapped with asbestos.
Flagging of pipes.
Right, but everything's new in our houses. So yeah, there is no asbestos concerns. It's all 10 years old or newer. So there's never an asbestos concern.
We had an inspector talk to us about this asbestos because we had some other investors that raised it as a concern. And we had him, he looked it up. He went to the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. He went to OSHA.com. He did a thorough investigation of this thing. I mean, he kicked out this huge report. He did it no charge. It was cool. Yeah. But he kicked out this huge report. And one of the things he said, it was the only thing that really mattered to me. I mean, some of the asbestos shingles that we had on some of the exterior of the properties, and it's 1 out of 10 maybe, and they're built in the 50s and 60s how this thing was made. It's been covered with how many layers of paint since then. It's been cleaned, it's been scraped, it's been gone over. But the thing about asbestos, the only way that it's ever a health hazard at all is when you're in there, like if you were to saw the shingle in 2, or if you're able to somehow take that asbestos and put it into a particulate form and have it ingested through inhalation. So to answer the question, there is some asbestos, it's 0 harm at all.
Yeah, look, I wonder, guys, can you just take us through sort of some typical numbers so that we get an idea of how the build-up of the costs work? What do you typically buy a property for? What do you spend on rehabs? Where are the margins? What are you covering in terms of guarantees and so on in terms of satisfying
from our costs, like what we do?
So who's responsible then for the
In what city? In what city? Well, just give me a city and I'll tell you the cost.
Well, let's start with Kansas City.
Okay. In the Section 8 areas, our typical entry cost is probably somewhere around 30 grand, all right, give or take, depending on how much work it needs. Our average rehab cost is probably somewhere around probably 10 if you average it out, 8 to 10. So 38 to 40 for total acquisition and rehab. Then you've got leasing fees, the appliances that we put in, our own insurance, some soft costs, things like that. We probably got another $4,000 to $5,000. So we're usually shooting for a target of $40,000 on those things. And we're looking for rents anywhere from $800 to $875 on that product. We have some that are better than others, but when I average them out, because I buy a lot of them, that's probably the cost.
And that's an average of the property. We're probably talking about a 3 to 4 bed single family home. We do some other properties too. We do 2 beds, we do duplexes, we do some other stuff. This is sort of an average baseline of the majority of the product that we're moving.
And the average return we can offer on the end is usually somewhere around 15 to 17%, because we have to actually make a margin on them too. So we usually sell them on 15 to sometimes 18, 15 to 18, just depends, percent rates of return. And we're usually making anywhere from, I'm always just really honest. I make 5 to 8 grand a deal. That's what I make. So, but we warranty things for a while. Okay, here's the deal. Who's the one in here that owns 67th Street Terrace? Who owns 67th Terrace, 3843?
Kara.
Her. Okay, just think about this, all right? This is a horror story that turned good. We rehab the properties. That's a nice house. I actually bought that house myself. I actually looked at that house myself and bought it from a friend of mine. So I know that house, and I very rarely know him. We bought that house. What was your rent originally supposed to be? Okay, so we had it rented for $619 or something like that. She bought it at $619. We have property management partners, okay? The partners are supposed to finish that rental process for us. We buy, rehab, and rent, then we pass it off to the property manager. Okay, property manager, now you manage. That one there, the property manager, because they do so much business with us, sometimes things fall through the cracks. It happens. It really does. They're not all perfect deals. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they are, because they're not. But we try to make them all perfect. So that one there, they never turned in the Section 8 voucher. They never turned it in. We had a girl who moved in. We passed the inspection. They didn't turn in the proper paperwork. This lady's living there for what, 6 months to a year or something? Never paid $1. And we didn't even know that she didn't have rent for 6 months or something, right? So we hear, okay, we got the super pissed off client from 21st Century that she's not getting rent. We got to make this thing right. So what do? We kick the tenant out. We go back in. This is 7, 8 months later. We kick the tenant out. We get it ready to go again, Section 8. We put a new tenant in. Here's a new tenant. And what's the new tenant paying rent?
$700.
So we got $75 more in rent. So when I'm saying I'm making the 4 to 7, 8 grand, whatever it is on the deals, I warranty the stuff for a while, and I stand by them forever, pretty much. I mean, I'm not going to put that on the dotted line, but I'm always going to do what's right. So now you got a property that's good, and you're happy, right? Yeah. So that's what happened. So I had to pay an extra. Not only that, I covered the rent. Yeah. I paid you the rent. So actually, I'm negative on that property. I remember I was pissed off about that one. So yeah, but nevertheless, so yeah, so I make money on the deals, but I have deals like this where I go negative. So I've sold and rented so many properties, and different people have so many different appetites. There's been places where I thought, wow, no one's ever going to rent that house, and I got tons of rental demand because there's a factory right around the corner. And there's been some other areas where I wanted to resell a property, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be great. It's a big, beautiful 2-story, and then all of a sudden it looks great in a picture, but no one buys it. But then I find out that the school, had a principal that did something he shouldn't have done, or they lost their accreditation. So these things are constantly changing. So the only thing that I can try to do is stay in the best area in general for the city, the hottest areas, because different block by block, subdivision by subdivision, things change, schools change, areas change, neighborhoods change. But for me, as long as I buy right, it doesn't matter to me. As long as I know I'm buying something at the right price, then I know I can always exit it. So when we buy, I don't sell anything that's not rented. Okay? So when someone's coming to me and they say, Tyler, here's 200 houses we want you to buy, I'm looking at all those houses, my guys are analyzing those houses, and they say, you know what, Tyler, these 100 are great buys. But of those hundreds that are great buys, only 50 of them we can rent. They're great buys, numbers-wise, but we can't rent them. So just buy these 50 so we can rent them. So this is something I'm thinking about all the time, because if I don't rent it, I don't sell it. I always tell my guys all the time, we're just a factory. We just produce houses. And my guys are always like, well, we want to sell this, get it going, get it going. Well, we don't sell anything or do anything until it's finished rented. Sometimes rented might be we have the Section 8 voucher or working it through the Section 8 process. But these are things I'm cognizant of. And I have to resell these properties. They have to be resellable. So it's the area of town or in relation to the other economic factors that I'm looking for, more than the look, style, feel of the house. It's the area, if that makes any sense. And that's a tough question because it's a moving target. So I really can't give you this great answer there. I don't know.
It also depends. I mean, I guess if you're going to look for resale down the road, you should probably look in a single-family home versus a multi-unit property. That'd be the one sort of dead giveaway on it. If that's your exit strategy, go for a single-family home. You'll naturally have a little bit more sellability and appreciation. The other thing is sort of the unknown is what are the economic tides of the U.S. and what are people doing as far as buying. 8 years ago, these single-family homes in America, you just put a for sale sign in the yard and boom, here you go. You get shocked at what people will pay you for it. No longer the case today, but would that environment still be the case? We may not be here talking, but if that case came around in a couple of years, it doesn't matter as much where the area, what the color paint, what are these sort of things. So that's one thing that we just don't know.
Just a simple question. Do you guys buy the houses back from 21st Century if any of the members actually want to sell it?
I don't buy them back generally, but sometimes I do. As a matter of fact, I've got a guy who came to me today and said he wants 80 houses. And I don't have 80 houses to sell today. And so I got this other guy who I know that we sold some properties to. He's not 21st Century. It predates my relationship. And I'm taking 5 of his.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, I get into a crunch, and I know some guys who say, hey, I've been wanting to sell my properties. I call them up and I sell them. He bought them from me 2 years ago for a cheaper price. I can sell them for more now. He says, you know what, Tyler? I got something else I need to do with the money, and so I just throw them into some other sales that I have. I don't generally do it. I do it to my funds. I don't do it to one, I call this onesie twosie. I don't do this to my individual buyers, but sometimes funds come to me and say, I need 100 houses, Tyler. Well, I'm like, and they don't care where I get them from. It's a lot different type of structure. So, and by the way, 112th Street just got turned over to the property manager. I just got the text. So when I saw it, I thought of you. I thought, the one you got on 112th, the property manager just got it, and then they just gave him your contact information, so they're going to be contacting
I thought you were going to talk about
Yeah, I just saw it. I said, hey, this is what she got on 112th.
Thank you.
I thought you were going to talk about how close that one
was.
was to almost getting thrown over into the...
That one was close.
It was like...
No, but I get all the emails. I demand the emails come through my email so I can see them. And I saw property manager alert. I'm not going to read your address, but 112th Street has been turned over to property management, so they're going to be contacting you.
Guys are on the case. You should get an email probably when the
Just
next
so you know.
48. Yep.
Great. So just on that topic then, if you don't buy it back from 21st Century, then what would your advice be then if our exit strategy is to actually sell it?
It just depends on the city. Property management companies generally have real estate license, so they can sell them for you.
Right.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. They're property managers. They're not the best sellers of properties. They can sell them, all right? How did the guy from Arizona just sell his? I just saw him come across. What'd he do? I'm just curious. I don't even know.
He actually just went back to an independent seller, and they were actually able to flip it out in less than 30 days.
He went to a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, get online and type in real estate agent Kansas City, and you'll see 7,000 of them. You know, just interview them, or property manager would be a good place to start. Well, they're all, with the agents, they're all licensed and under very strict regulations by the government. These people, if they break the rules, they get thrown in prison very quickly. This has been something that's been a hot topic in our country in the past. So the regulation's so tight that you're generally going to be fine. But if you want to know how to trust them, I would ask Joel or somebody at 21st or your property manager, you know, who do you trust? They should both be able to give you leads, or come back to us. I can give you 50 people right now that I trust. So, yeah, but I'm not going anywhere. Hopefully, you know, hopefully we'll be around. So.
Oh, we weren't actually going to take you, but if you wanted to come,
that's okay.
fine. Yeah.